What's going on, everyone? How are you today? Or this eve? Whatever time you're listening. How's it going? What's the haps?
Give me the 411.
If you know what that is.
You know what that is?
Hi, I'm Maryl Wilson, and I am. I'm the host of the Bold Women podcast, and I am accompanied by my friend Maria Weiler.
Hi.
Today, we're just going to get right into it.
Yeah.
Because we got a lot of ground to cover here.
We got ground to cover like it's a pasture.
Yeah, something like that.
I didn't mean to say pasture. I meant to say like field.
Okay.
Because pastures are a little smaller.
Anywho,
Beside the point.
we're talking about being stuck today.
But you know
Not
where
necessarily in the physical sense. All right, that's your own problem.
you know
gotta
what
figure that
I'm
out.
stuck on right now?
What?
The fact that we're on social media.
Oh, well, how about that?
Yeah, I just right there. I thought I'd stick that in here. But
She stuck it in there.
stuck it in there. But yeah, we're on social media, guys. So follow us on Instagram. That's our main go-to. Trying to ramp up the TikTok. Shout out to Maryl for leading the way.
Not the TikTok, because I have just been.
No.
That's almost an abandoned ship at this point. I'm going to try and get us back.
I'm just saying.
You
Guys,
have
we're on
83
socials.
followers going strong.
Let's go. Follow us on there. Interact with us. We'd love to hear your thoughts. All the things. So
Yeah. Otherwise, if you like Instagram better, we're on there too. So
yeah.
Yeah.
Anyways,
Why don't you
unstick
mention
it back to you.
All right. So I came across, I was like, man, oftentimes I will just Google like Bible study discussion questions for, and then our topic is I need help coming up with discussion questions. And I came across this blog post of this church, Grace Church out of Orlando.
Woo! We see you.
Yeah, they had some. It was really great. It was just great because it was just a bunch of questions and then scripture, and it was basically just rehashing a sermon message from a previous Sunday. And so we're just going to kind of jump into some questions that I put down here because I think it was great. I think some of them were great. So, Maria,
Yeah.
is there currently an area in your life where you feel stuck? If not, can you recall a time?
Yeah.
And what do you think is or was keeping you stuck?
I think I was reading something the other day and it was talking about how oftentimes like healing feels really messy and we don't feel like we're healing because it seems oftentimes when we're healing, like life actually gets messier and we associate, well, if I'm healing, it's going to get better. And so I think for me, feel like sometimes I feel stuck when my life still feels really messy, but I know it's from like I'm healing from things. And like people pleasing is one that I'm in my heart of hearts. I hate that I still struggle with it.
Yeah.
When it's like, Lord, I'm consciously making efforts not to. And I feel like, why can I never get over this? Why do I still struggle so much with that? Why can't I find the right balance of that? Sometimes I feel stuck in like friendship healings where I have, like relationships in my life that like, I wish they were better. And I feel like there's nothing I can do or ways that things feel stuck. So I think for me, feeling stuck often feels like I don't like when life feels messy, although I know it's a part of it. And I think that comes down to also some of my OCD tendencies. I don't like messy things, let alone in the spiritual side. As that's
What on earth? That was a sneeze?
sorry
What's
guys.
that?
I was trying to say I got to sneeze real fast so Byron could turn the mic off, but it snuck out before I could get it out. Anyways,
I think before we continue, we need to apologize for the assault on everyone's ears that just occurred due to Maria's sinuses.
I have tears rolling down my face right now. I'm so sorry. Oh.
All right.
So I would say that, like, when I feel like there's parts of my life that aren't in perfect order, and aren't smooth, I feel very uncomfortable and I get very like, I feel very stuck or like I can't go forward in anything until this is right, until this is fixed. Kind of thing.
I think about my professional life. And what has come to mind is professionally, I am what you would probably say is a highly motivated and ambitious person. I achieve one thing and it's not things are just too funny right now. She just moved her mic stand and it just like gave out the tiniest little squeak I've ever heard.
I am not trying to be annoying, guys. I was just getting really comfortable. All right, back to your professional life.
Yes. So, I tend to accomplish something and then that's like not good enough. So I'm always like, really.
What's next? What's next?
The next thing. I love being challenged at work. I love having to try and figure out difficult things. I will panic through it, as I've texted you earlier this week that I was like, I have to deal with this budget. Oh my gosh, I don't know what's going on. But I will feel stuck the minute that I start feeling like I am treading water in my job. And I hate that.
Yeah.
I hate being in a space where I am not being challenged professionally. Where like I'm not being like I guess mentally stimulated enough at my work because I love trying to figure things out.
You are brilliant though, so I could see where that would.
I love fast-paced things at work. I love, just being busy. I love having a full day because if you're going to have to work, I want to be busy all day. Like I want to just look up and be like, "Oh my gosh, it's time for me to log off. See you later."
Right.
Look at that. My whole day just flew by. That's awesome. And I got a lot done. And I felt that and I think the answer for me was the times that I felt stuck, and what was keeping me stuck was a combo of myself and God. Like my heart and my attitude and things that I wasn't realizing were not right. And so therefore God was just keeping me in that space.
I get you.
Something that was interesting was actually recently I had changed jobs in October of 2023, and so my predecessor had like retired at the end of the year, and I still have access to her inbox, and I'll probably have that for at least the rest of the year,
right?
Just in case stuff comes in or whatever, and people don't know that I'm now in that position or whatever. But I decided to get a little nosy and dig through her inbox and see how it came about that my resume made it across, because they had reached out to me out of nowhere.
Yeah.
And they were like, "Hey, would you be interested in this position?"
Matter of fact, I would.
And I was trying to be all cool. And at first I thought, because I had been submitting my resume all over the place, I was just not happy with what was going on at my last job. And I had felt that I was in that space, and I had been in that space for probably like 3 years where I was like, I am spinning my wheels. And I had told my boss repeatedly, I was like, I'm spinning my wheels. I need more challenge. I'm not going to do well. I'm not going to do well if you don't give me something. I need more responsibility. And unfortunately, what was given to me was like administrative tasks. And I was like, this is not the challenge I am looking for.
Right.
So then I got like randomly emailed by this recruiter at my current job. And so I was just digging through the inbox, just looking at the exchanges and stuff. And like it was just so funny because the recruiter had emailed my predecessor and was like, "Hey, this just randomly popped up in my search today." And it was like a month and a half before I took the job. And I was like, "Oh, that's so funny." And it was just interesting because there were other candidates they were talking about. And I was even seeing like the discussions they were having about the other candidates. And then my predecessor was just, and then I ended up, getting to have a conversation on the phone with my predecessor, and she said such kind things about me in emails. She was like, she gets it. We need to hire this one. Like, offer her the sun, moon, and stars, whatever you need to. She needs to have this position. And they were like, okay. And then they both had spoken to me too, and like they're all just saying like really nice things, like, oh yeah, we agree. We think she'll be a great fit. And I was like, oh, well, that's cool. So anyway, I was just getting a little nosy like that. But I think had I been approached for that position 3 years prior, when I was starting to feel stuck, like I was starting to feel like I could do this job in my sleep, and it was like, no, I needed to learn a lot more about patience, about communications, things like that I learned over that next 3 years as my job sort of progressed at my previous employer. And that all of that readied me for this position, because it was I was in a leadership position in management at my previous job, but now I have my own department. And so that in and of itself was like, okay, yeah, I get it now. But that was a really long-winded explanation.
Oh, you're great. Well, as you were talking, and I know I had mentioned like the fear of people, I can think of times and situations where I have felt stuck, and literally a couple of years ago, I remember even praying like, Lord, I feel stuck. Like I feel stuck. And I know it was, I feared the thoughts of man more than I feared what God thought about just different situations I was in.
Ooh, do you want to hear this quote?
100%.
Okay. If you want beauty in your future, you must die to some things in your past.
Agree.
Well, okay. They didn't see the question that said, do you agree or disagree, and why? She answered before I could ask, but she agrees with the statement.
I agree with that
Now
statement.
tell us why.
Because I think some of our greatest breakthroughs happen on the opposite side of change.
I agree. And then I added this one that was like, what does it mean to die to yourself or to specific sins? And like, what does that look like in practice? Because we could be, somebody could be listening to this and being like, I am hearing that a lot in Christianity, like die to yourself. What does that even mean?
I think it means dying to the way you want something done. That trusting, ultimately it comes to like trusting God and his timing, his ways, the way he wants to do things more than what you think. So I think it comes down to that. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. Because so many times, like, my understanding makes sense, right? Like there's a reason why we have it. God gave us a mind. It does make sense. But at the end of the day, do I trust on like what God's doing outside of more than what I can see?
Yeah. I think it also means you have to kill off what distracts you from an eternal perspective.
Yeah.
So if you're focused on just the physical, just the here and now, just obtaining wealth or fame, fortune, whatever, body count, I don't know. People are weird.
People
They've
have
got, social media following, all that stuff. If that is your focus, that is not eternal. None of that is eternal. You can't take it with you when you die.
Doesn't go.
So that's what that means. It's killing off the part of you that desires that so much, because that is distracting you from an eternal perspective. And if you don't have an eternal perspective, you're not seeking the Lord.
Right. Well, what's the verse too? It's in Psalms where it says, delight yourself in the Lord and he will give you the desires of your heart. That doesn't mean he's going to give you everything you want. It means as I delight in him, he's going to make my heart desire the right things.
Yes. And he will provide them.
And he will provide them for me. So I think that's kind of where that die to self comes to too, is finding my joy and delight in the Lord more so than finding my joy and delight in myself.
Yeah, that's good.
Because myself, it will only last momentarily, but in him, it will be like sustaining.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay, question for you. True or false? If someone doesn't know God's law, are they still accountable for breaking it?
And
why or why not?
Okay, I have the reference of Romans 7:7-9 here.
What's it say?
Which says, well then, am I suggesting that the law of God is sinful? Of course not. In fact, it was the law that showed me my sin. I would never have known that coveting is wrong if the law had not said you must not covet. But sin used this command to arouse all kinds of covetous desires within me. If there were no law, sin would not have that power. At one time, I lived without understanding the law, but when I learned the command not to covet, for instance, the power of sin came to life. And I died. That's part of verse 10, but it started. I had to finish the sentence.
Oh, you're good.
So I guess I would say that is, let me scroll back up here. False.
Okay.
Because, I mean, if you don't know, how can you be held accountable to something you don't know
You don't
about?
know.
But as soon as you are made aware of it, then you are accountable.
Right.
Because then you have a choice to either do it or not, or to partake or not.
Byron's typing something here. Wait for it.
Good Lord, it's like 2 words a minute.
Okay.
The slowest typing I've ever seen.
Are you going to get us a scripture reference for this too before you read it? He said
No.
He said no.
He said, God's laws are written on men's heart. Everyone knows and had a feeling of right and wrong. Well, okay, that's true. There is an intrinsic, like,
Moral code inside of
moral
us.
code, I think, that we are all given, and that does develop, hopefully, if you weren't, like, severely abused in childhood and or developed mental illness that would impact that.
Right.
Or had serious traumatic brain injury to impact that. But I digress. Did you have something you wanted to say about it, Byron? Okay, no.
Okay.
He's just being
He's
silent
just
today.
typing.
He's just typing. He says his 2 cents.
His
All
2
right.
cents.
Well, thanks for
Thanks,
that.
Byron.
And your 2 words per minute. You should take some typing lessons.
Okay, so the Pastor Mike from Grace Church.
Well, hold on.
Oh,
But what Byron said,
okay.
I think he brings up an interesting point because he is saying that it is true. People are still accountable for breaking God's law because he's written it on man's heart. I don't know, but I think if your eyes haven't been opened to God's law, it's there, yes, but it's revealed to you, I think,
Yeah.
in that sense.
I feel like he has something he wants to say. And the look
No,
on his
the look
face,
on
and
his
he's
face,
not
he just
saying
said-
it.
He doesn't want to argue with us today. Oh,
Here he comes.
Listen.
Speak your piece on it.
The
I wanna hear
heart.
it.
Look, everyone is, the wages of sin is death.
Yes.
That's everybody. Death sentence is put on everybody,
Yeah.
whether you
true.
think you're a good person or not, whether
Mhm.
you know God's laws or not. The death sentence is on you.
Yeah, you're still dying.
You're done.
Okay.
So you can sit and to be and that's another one of them. I think I'm a good person. It's because you see yourself as self-righteous,
Yeah.
and you're not. You're just like the rest of us.
Okay.
Okay.
Can I ask you a question?
Right.
So when you were not living for the Lord, did you ever have this feeling of like how I'm living isn't right? Like throughout
Well-
it. You know what I mean? Like in some of like the prime of when you were just doing whatever you wanted.
No, I mean I was just doing what I wanted.
But you grew up in
But-
church even though, didn't
Yeah,
you?
I grew up in church. I mean, there was consciousness of this is wrong.
Yeah,
all the time,
I agree.
all the time. So I don't think I'm a good candidate for that question.
Well, that's what
Because
I'm just trying to ask.
I was
of-
taught to do the right thing, and
I
I
agree.
didn't want to.
My waywardness.
But there are people that were not taught that way, but they know that murder's wrong.
Sure.
Right.
They know that stealing is wrong. Deep down inside, they you know what I'm saying?
But I think that
Those
Paul brought a
are-
good point with the example of like being covetous. Because it's like, I don't know, it's kind of a, what's the word? I don't want to say vague.
Don't covet your neighbor's things.
Yeah, I mean, it's like
That can be people. That can be stuff. That can be lifestyle. That
Well-
can be.
somebody's physical or
Physical
personality
yeah.
traits. I mean, I don't know. It's a tough question, but it's a good one.
It's a great one.
And I don't think that any of us are wrong in
and
our
the question
responses.
is, if someone doesn't know God's law, and are you talking about the Ten Commandments? Because that's God's moral law. That's kind of
what
the standard he
it's- what
put
it's
down.
saying.
yeah.
If somebody doesn't know that, like nobody's ever, hey, here's the 10.
Or
You know that?
You grew up like a
No,
Hindu
you know
or something.
it's wrong to do things. That's it's in you.
That's a moral.
It's
yeah,
in
I mean,
you.
It's just like that little moral compass that everyone should have.
Yeah, and if you're not, you're just an evil incarnate person.
I should have called somebody at Grace Church and been like, "Hey, can you expand upon God's law? Do you mean the 10 Commandments, or what are we talking about here?"
I think you bring up a good point though too. But what about someone who was brought up Hindu, or someone who was literally brought up in an atheist home and taught to believe?
They still have morals, though. Moral
We would
standards.
one would hope.
Yeah, and that's the way you always ask them that question. If they say, "Well, it's okay to do this, but that's wrong." So, what standard are you basing that wrongness on? Where are you getting that moral standard?
Where are you getting the moral standard?
What moral standard are you getting that? Well, it's always going to go back to God, but then that's what shuts them down, because they're like, well,
You can't point to. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting.
Okay. Well,
interesting thoughts.
along those
It
lines,
could be true or false.
can you think of a specific time that you weren't aware of a particular belief or behavior that went against God's law that you were doing, and then what happened when you became aware of it?
Gosh, there's a couple things. Oh, one's from childhood and one's as an adult. Let's just split the room and say some weird stuff.
Perfect.
All right.
I'm trying to. I'm literally trying to think of.
Trying to read my mind?
No,
Or-
I'm just
okay.
trying to think of some stuff.
As a kid, stealing. I think I've talked about this before, but like I stole candy after church at in the grocery store, and my dad caught me. But that's like a very early childhood memory, because when we were in that particular grocery store, when we were going to that church,
Was it Fairway?
no, this was when we were going to church in Des Moines. So this
Okay,
would have
never
been a church grocery store in Des Moines.
Okay. I don't know why like that would have any effect, but
No, but so I had to have been really young. I can't even remember. Maybe age of 5, possibly younger.
okay.
But anyway,
still,
shame was what attached to that. I felt horrible and I felt awful. I felt like I had disappointed my dad. And then later on in life, I came across a reel on masturbation, and that being a thing about sexual immorality. And I was like, wait, what? Hold on. What? And I was like listening to this girl talking about it. And she's like, when I got convicted about this, and was like talking about it. And I was like, I honestly had no idea. Had no idea. I was like, oh, okay. Because honestly, a lot of people, especially Christians, because a lot of them are celibate, are like, well, I've got to have release some way. I'm not going out and like dumping my seed in a bunch of women, for example. You know, I don't know a cleaner way of saying that, but you know, just thinking about it in that sense, like, because a lot of Christians are like, well, yeah, because I'm not having sex, but I'm still having like these desires, and this is a way that I take care of it. And I actually heard this also later in a message from Pastor Jerry Flowers. Again, I watch a lot of his stuff because he's just great.
Very good.
But he said, okay, because he talks about masturbation, and I love his church and what they're doing and the messages that they have, because he always says my generation requires real, and he won't.
Oh my gosh, but it's
shy
true,
away from
it's
anything.
True.
And he's up there on the pulpit talking about masturbation, and I love it, because I love a fearless pastor that is like, I'm just doing what the Lord is imparting on me to share with everybody. And he said, okay, you can, because he's had people at his church ask him like, okay, well, what about masturbation? Because, you know, there's always the question too of people who are Christians, but they're abstaining from sex before marriage, but they're dating, and they're like, well, how far is too far, and stuff like that. And then the question of masturbation comes up and stuff. And he had said, all right, well, you can go ahead and masturbate as long as you can give God glory while you're doing it. And if you can't do it, then you probably shouldn't be doing it.
That's good.
And it was like, oh my gosh. Like, okay.
Yeah.
And that was honestly something I was like, I had no idea. But I also went to a First Baptist church. Like, I grew up in a Baptist church and everything was incredibly conservative. It was just, there was a lot of stuff
Like you
they
didn't
did
talk
not
about
talk
anything.
about. And you definitely didn't talk about sex or anything like that in church. So I had no idea. And when I heard that hot take, I was like, what?
Yeah.
Wait a minute. So yeah, that was mine.
Yeah.
What about you?
They, I'm trying to think, like I'm going to be real honest. Like I was an incredibly sensitive little kid, and I really, this is also saying, I know I did wrong, but I was so terrified to do wrong that like I was,
You were doing wrong.
that would have been like, that was obsessive in a way of, like I never, like the thought of disappointing my parents was like just catastrophic if I was for like in any way, shape or form to get in trouble for anything. So I think what pops in my head too was something similar to what you're talking about, like in the past part, but, like dealing with like, okay, post marriage. Yeah. So it's like, I've been exposed and been able to have sex in the way God intended it and not feel any guilt or shame for it. But then once that's gone from you, and now like, yeah, going into those things of like your body still craves what it once had that wasn't wrapped, that was in the place that God had it, but now you can't.
Yeah, because it wasn't supposed to happen that you were getting divorced.
Yeah. And so now you're left to pick up the pieces and feeling that like the way things that would happen, even like the dreams that you would have and that would wake you up, and just different things like that, where it's like, this is a struggle that I know feels so wrong, but I can't deny that it's happening to me.
Sure.
Or, just feeling that way about it. Or I think, like you said, spot on, is like, how far is too far? Like, so I know that there's times I've struggled with that. Okay, cool. Not having sex, not crossing XYZ lines, but still, how far is too far? And I think sometimes that, and I know I've talked with you about it, but the struggle comes too of, the hard part of when I've had it and not felt the guilt and shame, to like all of a sudden now feel guilt and shame when you can't, because like, now it's wrong.
Then when you get married again, you got to go back to I don't have to feel guilt and shame for this.
Yeah. So just that, like, that's really hard.
Yeah.
That's really, really hard. So I would say, I know it's not necessarily like something I didn't know and then knew, but that's something that I didn't know would be as hard as what it is.
All right.
Does that count?
Yeah. I guess it's more of a softball answer.
That's because I'm not to be rude, I'm genuinely trying to think of something that I didn't know was one. And then I was like, oh, that is?
It's okay.
I can't.
It's all right.
Can't think of.
It's all right, Weiler. Read the quote from Pastor Mike from
Pastor
Grace
Mike
Church,
from
since
Grace
we're just
Church.
reading off their website, basically.
Okay, so he said this in the Grace magazine. It says, the Western Church has a judicial view of sin. We tend to see sin as a violation of the law. Therefore, the remedy for a sinful heart is to be made legally right before God. The Eastern Church, however, views sin as not legal violation, but as a sickness. They recognize that sin is
inextricably,
linked with death. Every time we sin, a little piece of death enters the equation. If I cheat on my taxes, I experience the death of my integrity. If I cheat on my wife, the death of our intimacy. Sin, then, is a form of death and disease in our lives, and as such requires more than legal absolution. It requires healing.
Okay, I loved that quote because I thought it was so interesting, and I hadn't thought about how the Western Hemisphere and the Eastern Hemisphere views sin. And the way that he broke that down was very interesting to me.
And I like the part, too, where it says it requires healing, because how many times have you and I talked where it's like, okay, my heart's got to adjust.
Yeah.
Or like the times I was like, hey, Maryl, I just prayed, Lord, help me hate sin the way you hate sin, because I know it's a heart issue.
Yeah.
That like it's deeper than just, oh, shoot, messed up. I want my heart to be right and my heart to be pure before the Lord.
Mm-hmm. Here's another quote I want you to think about.
Okay.
It's from A.W. Tozer.
Okay.
What comes into our minds when we think about God is the most important thing about us. What comes to mind when you think about God?
Honestly, like I hate to say it because...
Don't hate to say it, just say it.
Well, because I know it's not the right perspective. But my first thought
I'm
is,
sure you're probably not the only one.
is I don't want to make him mad and I don't want to fail him.
Yeah.
When I think
same.
about God,
I think anybody listening to this can go, yeah, same. I've thought that too.
Yeah, like my first thought is like, God, please don't be mad at me. I don't want to upset you.
Okay, well, that's not my first thought, but
What's yours?
what comes to mind when I think about God? I have been learning, or I have been trying over the past few years, especially as an adult. You know, if you've grown up in church, you'll probably know what I'm talking about. But it's like you have for a big portion of your life, you learn about God in the way that your parents teach you, and the way that the church that they take you to teaches you. But then at some point as an adult, you have to take responsibility for your relationship with God. And one part of that process for me has been changing my perception of him from an authoritative figure, which that's not to say I don't believe that he's not sovereign, that he's not an authority or anything.
Right.
But the way that I approach him is not like, oh, Lord, I like cowering or whatever when I come to him. I have now started viewing him like he is one of my closest friends, like my confidant, like because, you know, as we've talked about before, it's like he should be the first person you run to when you have an issue or something. And I don't want to run to somebody that I'm scared of. And I don't want to run to somebody that I am fearing repercussions of my actions from. I want to run to my best friend. I want to run to my comfort. I want to run to actually experience and receive like legitimate mercy, legitimate grace, and forgiveness. And like for me, I can't actually do that if I'm viewing God as like as
Zeus who's going to strike you down.
Yeah.
The second you mess up.
Yeah. I mean, so in a sense, that's kind of a similar perspective of kind of the way that you view him.
Yeah. Well, I was just looking at the next question where it says, well, I'm hopping down, but this one kind of ties into this where it says,
we're hopping all over.
Talking about your journey and trusting God, do you feel safe with him? Why or why not? And I can say there's portions of my life I have not, but I know it's not because of who he is. I know it's because of my incorrect perspective.
For sure.
And that's something that I'm honestly working at coming out of now. I didn't used to. And we had a conversation this past weekend about how my prayer is to like, Lord, help me get my childlike faith back because that's been gone. And that side of, I never used to view him that way. Some reason in my life, I now view him that way.
Yeah.
But I also know that's incorrect.
Yeah.
But I also need my heart to adjust so I can see him genuine, not in just in my mind, be like, oh no, that's not how God is, but like have my heart adjust to see that side of him.
Yeah.
So I would say as a whole, I've wrestled with the season of I feel safe with him if I know I'm not messing up, and I feel unsafe with him if I'm struggling. In a way of, I also know that's incorrect. I'm saying that like,
I was going to say, Weiler.
I'm saying that from a way of like, I know it's incorrect. And, like I feel safe with him if there's nothing that I'm aware of that I'm actively like tripping over or whatnot,
and that's okay. And I say that that's okay because you are actively in the middle of that struggle right now, and you are actively working on healing that within yourself. So that's why I'm saying that's okay, because it's okay to be in those spaces, because if you're not, then you're not going to grow and you're not going to change. And if you don't get to sit in that discomfort, then you don't get to experience the release from it.
Yeah. And so I think that's part of my life where I feel stuck currently is in some of my views of God, that I don't want to have them anymore in that way, because it makes me feel like the person that I love the most is hardest to be around at times.
Yeah.
Or not hardest to be around is what am I going to get when I'm around him? It makes God unstable when that's absolutely farthest from the truth.
Yeah.
So
That's good.
How do you think someone who's listening could find like true freedom in the things in their life and get unstuck?
True freedom.
True freedom. Not just mental, but where it drops to their heart.
I think, well, something that you've told me a few times is to simply ask. You can ask God for that. Like, hey, I understand up here in my brain that my perspective, my view of things is not correct. And I know that. And I don't know how to get that to transfer to my heart so that I can experience healing and release from that. And that's a good place to start praying about it.
Mm-hmm.
But then actually also having to wrestle through that. And you and I have talked about this, but if you're listening, it sounds kooky, but because we can sit here and say all day like, oh, well, God knows our thoughts. God can read our thoughts. But there is something that happens when you physically say it. When you physically sit 100%. There in your room, in your quiet time, and you're going, God, I don't feel safe with you. God, I don't feel like I have been able to trust you. I understand in my mind that is an incorrect view that I have of you, and that is due to the trauma or other life experiences that have happened to have impacted my perception of who you are as my Father. And he can't, like, they always say, there's power of life and death in the tongue. And that's why it's important to also physically speak those things, because you make it real, you make it known. And he also wants you to acknowledge that and say those things to him. Yes, he can read your thoughts, but like we have said so many times, he's a gentleman. He's going to stand at the door and hold it open, and you can either walk through it or you can invite him in, depending on how you want to look at it. But it's like he provides you with the opportunity. Like, the opportunity is, that he knows your thoughts, and you have a choice to say them out loud and like acknowledge them. That invites him in to your situation, and that invites him to have you experience his presence, and to just know that he is there. He will do that. And so,
that's good.
Yeah, we have a lot of scripture too.
Yeah. That's good. I had a thought to attach to that when you first started talking, and then the more you were talking, I was like, my thought was gone. But scripture. I'll do the rest of Romans. I'll do the rest of Romans 10 through 13, because I had originally I read 7 through 10. And so it says, so I discovered that the law's commandments, which were supposed to bring life, brought spiritual death instead. Sin took advantage of those commands and deceived me. It used the commands to kill me. But still, the law itself is holy, and its commands are holy and right and good. But how can that be? Did the law, of which is good, cause my death? Of course not. Sin used what was good to bring about my condemnation to death, so we can see how terrible sin really is. It uses God's commands for its own evil purposes. I'm going to read Romans 8, 1 through 2.
Okay.
It says, so now there is no condemnation for those who belong to Christ Jesus. And because you belong to him, the power of the life-giving Spirit has freed you from the power of sin that leads to death.
That's good.
Romans 8, 24 through 25 says, we were given this hope when we were saved. If we already had something, we don't need to hope for it. But if we look forward to something we don't yet have, we must wait patiently and confidently. I always love that one too, because it's like just that thought of like, hope is because something's not there yet, and Jesus wants to give us like eternal hope that no matter what we face, he's always in it, and there's always good that's going to come out of it. Like that's the hope that we have that's in him.
And I want to read Romans 7, 5, and 6. I won't read the entire scripture that I had there, but I just like these last two verses, which is, when we were controlled by our old nature, sinful desires were at work within us, and the law aroused these evil desires that produced a harvest of sinful deeds resulting in death. But now we have been released from the law, for we died to it and are no longer captive to its power. Now we can serve God, not in the old way of obeying the letter of the law, but in the new way of living in the Spirit.
I feel like sometimes scripture is just like, all right, and anybody got anything else?
Ding dong. There we go.
So good. I think just, and especially just something you just said there too, is if we want to get unstuck, we have to ask God to come into our current or present.
Yeah.
Like that's
yeah,
the
you
biggest.
have to be in that.
You have to, and you said something about wrestling, and I heard this quote once said, no clue who said it, but it was, it was my brother. I don't know where he got it, but he told me to me.
Okay. Thank you, Adam. In advance.
That God loves a genuine struggle versus a false surrender.
Yeah.
And that always stuck with me of like he's going to honor, like I'm genuinely struggling with you and I'm working through this with you versus like, oh yeah, I love God, but it's all false. This
Yeah.
what's the word? Facade. I was going to say facade, but I was like, that's not right.
Facade.
Facade.
You got Byron squawking over
But-
there.
I was picturing the word in my head and I was like, don't mess it up. Meryl's on the mic.
It's facade.
No, it's not. Whatever. But just that
Yes, facade.
like, oh yeah, Lord, you can have whatever. And then it's like, no, I'm going to do
No.
whatever I want. Like just, I'm going to wrestle with you. And then he does the work.
Yeah. So many of our conversations that Maria and I have had have been like, dude, I literally just sat in my room last night and was like, Lord, why aren't you doing this for me?
Mhm.
Why isn't this what or not why? Well, yes, because
Yeah.
sometimes my attitude sucks, but other times it'll be like, like, why is this happening? Why am I still struggling with this? What am I not understanding? That is usually that's a big question I ask him because I'm like, am I stupid?
Yeah.
What am I not getting?
I've
here?
been up to him like, what am I missing here? What am I supposed to learn? What is this
Yeah.
lesson?
Yeah, and it's I have to tell you, I think it was you, Maria, that told me that once. It was just like invite him into your struggle, and that's what I started doing was like physically saying like,
Mhm.
Lord, here's my beef, and here is
Come
what
into-
I do not understand is what's going on, and
Yeah.
I need help understanding what in tarnation I'm supposed
Yeah.
to do about it. And I don't know, something just happened. Like something happened. And I mean, it's like along with what you said, but something happens when you physically say it.
Mhm.
And I think it's just, that allows the Lord to actually begin to start working on your heart when you can physically speak it out loud. So I would encourage you that if you've not had a physical conversation with God, then you should probably try it.
I think at that point too, it's that vulnerability side where we're actually vulnerable with God. And he's like, now that you're weak, I can work.
Yeah.
Like now that you're going to put your guard down and not have to try to fight it all for yourself
You're
and not
trying
to
be
do it.
too cool.
You're not trying to be too cool. Now where your weakness, my strength can come in.
Yeah.
Because you're actually like honest with it.
Yeah.
Well, and me to you, and this is why, I mean, you hear us say it all the time, and if you've been in church from when we recorded this, we've been talking about the importance of community, that having people around you is so vital too, I think, to getting unstuck, because this was just a few days ago, and you have no idea I'm going to say this or that I prayed this, but I remember like thanking God for you, and I remember even praying like, Lord, help me sense like Meryl's teaching me freedom in him that I haven't been able to learn for myself. Like just me seeing you walk out your life, that I've been so grateful for. And I'm like, Lord, help me taste and understand freedom in you the way that Maryl does. And so that's been like
It's a beautiful place to be, my friend.
I know, but I'm just saying from the aspect of, I know what you had to go through to get there. And I'm so thankful that he's put you in my life in the aspect of, I never thought this would be a struggle a day in my life with the way I grew up, how my relationship with the Lord was, to like have to relearn that terrifies me, because like and even too, shame that I feel that I have to learn it, but in a way of like, shouldn't be a struggle for you, Maria. You should know God. You should, the list could go on, but I did the other day. I was like, Lord, help me grasp freedom like Maryl understands it. So thank you for being a great example on that in my life.
Well, that's so sweet.
Oh,
Thanks. I would say one more thing to, when you have those kinds of questions of like, or those thoughts that go through your head, again, me to you, everyone else in the room, it's fine. You're just listening in. But when you are struggling with those thoughts and you're hearing those things, because I remember the other night when we were all talking, you had said, I feel like this is my fault. Like, this is my fault. And what I had wanted to say to you, and for whatever reason I didn't, I don't know why I didn't ask, but
A good song probably came on.
Probably.
Just kidding.
But the question to ask yourself when you have thoughts like that is, who told me that?
Mm-hmm. That's very good.
And you just sit in that for a minute. Because who told me that?
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're sitting here blaming yourself like, oh, I should have known better. I should have done X, Y, Z. I was raised this way, so therefore this is how it should go. Well, guess what? You have to learn it again, Weiler.
Yeah.
You know, and the thoughts that accompany it, who's telling you that?
Mm-hmm. No, that's great.
Yeah. So, anyway.
Anyways.
Get off my
Welcome
box.
to Get Maria Getting Pinned in a Corner. Chapter 27.
We're all growing together.
That's good. That's
That's
how we
good.
learn, right?
It is good, yeah. Yeah, I have zero extra thoughts.
Me
I
either.
think this is
for
a
a
good
second.
place to
For a
know.
second, I was like, "Dang, Byron's closing us out." We didn't even say our closing line. Byron's like, "Well, they done."
Byron's like, I'm sick of you guys. Get out of here.
All right, guys, we love you all.
Yes, thanks for joining us today. And yeah, reach out. Let us know what you think
Yeah.
about this episode and if you have any thoughts or comments.
And if you have like counselors and stuff you were trying to hook me up with, I already have one. But thank you for your concern. She needs help. No, just kidding.
So do I, apparently.
All right, love you guys.
Bye.
Bye.